Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast. My name is Carter Froelich, and I'm glad to be before you again today. Today's episode is a little different in that I am going to be interviewed by Pam Giss, who is Launch's Southwest Division's managing principal. And Pam is going to be talking to me and asking questions about our new book that we're just putting out called Land to Lots: How to Borrow Money You Don't Have to Pay Back and Launch Master Plan Communities. So Pam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
I know, it's been so long, right? Well, great, Pam, and I really appreciate you taking the time just so that we can give the audience a little bit of background of Land to Lots, why we wrote it, what we're trying to get across, and provide a little bit more detail on the book should they want to purchase the book or get the ebook and drill down on some of the concepts that we use on a daily basis to help our clients finance infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Ask away.
Super. Great book. Really interesting and really informative. And the first thing that comes to mind, you wrote this book. Why did you write it? What was your goal in putting this together?
Well, thanks for that question. And as you know, what we deal with on a daily basis can be very, very complex. In our continued mission to be a hero to the development community, I like, and I know we as an organization like to put out information that our clients and other developers, home builders, mixed-use developers, commercial developers, all the developers can utilize immediately to help them finance infrastructure, reduce costs, and mitigate risk. Especially where we find ourselves right now, where the world is a little topsy-turvy, meaning that we have infrastructure costs that continue to fluctuate. We have the direct costs, lumber, plumbing, insulation, drywall, fluctuating for our home building clients. We have interest rates on A&D loans continuing to escalate, if you can even get a loan today. And one of the mechanisms that we utilize is truly a way, and this is a little tongue-in-cheek, on how we can help our clients borrow money that they don't have to pay back. Meaning, we are going to be setting up special purpose taxing districts, issuing bonds to build infrastructure, and then ultimately that obligation to repay the bonds will be passed on to the end users of the project. So I know there's a lot of developers in the states where we primarily do business that are familiar with these mechanisms, but we not only wanted to get the idea of the special district out and how that can help you access cash in the public markets at tax-exempt interest rates to fund public infrastructure, but the additional strategies that we lay out in the book on how you can reduce construction costs and mitigate risk. And we can talk about those a little further. But those were really the big items we wanted to get out and discuss and get out into the world for our clients and potential clients to read and understand.
So when you're saying get out in the world, who is your target here? I mean, who needs to read this book?
The audience for this book would be investors who are planning and entitling master plan communities, residential communities, industrial communities. And why would they want to read this? Well, number one, a way for them to reduce risk and enhance value for their projects is to obviously get it entitled. But to the extent that they're establishing a special purpose taxing district, all of a sudden they've just strapped on an ATM to this project. And when they're selling that project to a developer, they should let them know that, hey, we just strapped an ATM to your project that you have access to, and we would like to get compensated for the value we've created by setting up the district. Obviously, the master plan developers would be another group that should look at reading this book. Public, private home builders, be them regionals or local builders. You need to have a project probably of a couple hundred acres to make this a viable transaction in terms of the cost of issuance to make it worth your while and economically feasible. And then naturally mixed-use developers, especially when they're having a very intense project in terms of land use planning, and they have parking garages that need to be constructed. This would be of benefit to them as well. And last but not least, the commercial/industrial developers that have to put in a lot of big infrastructure to their sites.
So does it matter if I'm in Florida versus California versus Arizona, or do the mechanisms that you're laying out in this book translate across jurisdictions?
Yeah, great question. Special districts started at the beginning of the 20th century when we started putting infrastructure in cities and towns, water systems, sewer systems, as the automobile required roads. To my knowledge, every state in the union has the ability to do improvement districts. And the improvement districts were set up by the counties and the cities to put in the roadways and the water and sewer and the treatment facilities for water and sewer. So while every state has this type of financing mechanism, they're not the most powerful mechanisms that are available. Where we see special districts being utilized the most are in the Smile states, from the Carolinas down through Florida, across over to Texas, across Arizona, California, and it's now starting to get up into Washington, oddly enough, after a number of years. Where we see this used primarily Florida, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and California are really the states that utilize this mechanism the most. And when you take a look at where all the top-selling master plans are, and I know you look at this every 6 months with RC Elco and putting together the launch infrastructure financing mechanisms report that you do with RC Elco, you see that the majority of the master plan communities are in Texas and in Florida that are. And every one of them, I believe, there may be one or two, they all utilize this special purpose district, be it a CDD in Florida or a MUD primarily in Texas to finance the infrastructure. And I think the reason we're starting to see that right now is the jurisdictions are getting out of the infrastructure business, and they're saying to the development community, hey guys, we don't want to build this, you build it, you can use the tools. And so you're really seeing this privatization of the infrastructure. It'll either be owned and operated by the district in the case of the MUDs and the CDDs in Florida. Oftentimes in Arizona, California, Nevada, it's built by the district and then turned over to the city or the county to own and operate. But I only see these districts becoming more and more prevalent as the population continues to grow. And when you take a look at our infrastructure, we're always going to need new infrastructure, and we're going to need to repair the infrastructure we've already got.
Yeah. When you are going through and looking at different states and what they're doing to finance infrastructure, you really start to realize how underutilized these tools are in certain markets. We see them a lot in Florida and Texas, but even in states where they're more prominent, we're leaving a lot of dollars on the table. Yeah. So this is a good book to get out there to tell people there's a better way to finance infrastructure.
Right. Last year, I believe the districts within the state of Arizona issued maybe $25 million of new money, taking out the refinancings. Whereas in Colorado, there was over $1 billion of infrastructure.
Staggering.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just crazy that some states are utilizing this so much more efficiently and effectively to put infrastructure in the ground ahead of growth showing up. And I think a lot of states, Arizona being one, could use these tools more effectively and efficiently to compete with, let's say, Texas.
Right.
Let's face it, we're all in competition. The state's looking to bring business and create economic development. And to the extent that we have the infrastructure in place, the site locators for large companies are going to be more willing to move their business because the infrastructure's in place day one. They don't have to wait for that infrastructure to be constructed. But the book, and you're talking about the audience, who else should be looking at it? Quite honestly, the elected should look at it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Because this is not a scary thing. We've been doing it since the early 1900s, and there are states that use this all the time. We're spending a lot of time in Texas, working on a lot of different deals in Texas, and it is so much easier to do business in Texas than it is pretty much anywhere else in the country.
Right.
And they use their tools. They have a lot of them, and they expect you to use them, and they encourage you to use them. And that's why right now, as we sit here, Dallas is the number one home building or new home market, followed by Houston, followed by Phoenix, followed by Austin. So out of the top four, 3 of them are in Texas, and then San Antonio's at number 6. So
Wow.
there's something going on in Texas with their water that everybody wants to be there. And
Right.
it's because they're pro-growth, and they really work at helping the business community do business.
So it looks like a lot of this is about demystifying, this whole how do we finance infrastructure. What else do you want readers to understand after reading this book?
Well, it doesn't have to be as scary as a lot of people think, and everybody they may have good experiences, they may have bad experiences, they may think it's very complicated, and let's face it, it is complicated, but there are proven paths that can be taken, and we lay out one, and that's the one that we use, that we call the launch sequence. But we, as you will find in the book, through the launch sequence, break down the transactions into 3 categories, if you will. Planning, meaning what is your project, where is it, what is your current property tax rate, what is the infrastructure you have to build, what are the opportunities you're pursuing as a business plan, what are the challenges that you have, what is your current financing. We're taking all of this information, all of these puzzle pieces, and putting it together to craft a custom financing plan for you and your project where it's located. Once we have that information, we're then going before the jurisdiction to say, here's who we are, here's what our project is, here's what we need to build, here's how we would like to finance it. What do you think? Once the jurisdiction or the agency, assuming we need to get approval, come back to us and say, yeah, we think this is a good project. Would you, if we set up this district, would you build a traffic light for us? And our clients can take that into consideration. But assuming they want to move forward, we've gone from the planning stage over to the implementation. And the implementation stage is nothing more than implementing that which was planned. And we're really the pathfinders and the trail leaders on this journey we're going to be taking our clients on. And the thing that we have found is there's so many different players involved in the transaction, and a lot of times the players bring to the transaction the kind of the sort of similar document that they had used on a previous transaction, and they bring it to our client's transaction. And somebody has to go through and read all of the documents to make sure that which we planned in the planning stage of our transaction is actually that which is implemented. And we've seen documents where the attorneys haven't changed names of cities. They had different deal points that would have been very, very harmful to our client had we not gone through and removed them. So we are, even though we're not attorneys, I know you are, I'm a CPA, but these are the documents that we focus on all the time, and we're going through to make sure that that which is planned is implemented.
So this is such a niche area. It's not a big area. There's not a lot of expertise out there in this area. How did you wind up doing this? We were talking earlier, and you mentioned the advent of the automobile. I don't think you go back that far.
Yeah.
But how did you wind up doing this?
Yeah. I wasn't in existence at that time, but so it's kind of an interesting story. I like to tell it, but as I mentioned, I'm a CPA, and I worked for an accounting firm for 2 years and 2 months too long. And I was a savings and loan guy, and I hated it, couldn't stand it. And so after 2 years and 2 months too long of doing auditing, I was moved into the management consulting department at Kenneth Leventhal. And this would have been in the mid-'80s. And being the newly minted consultants, we needed to develop an expertise that we could market, if you will, to start to assist our clients. And for those of the audience that are old enough to remember Kenneth Leventhal, they were the premier real estate accounting and consulting firm in the United States. And they were bought by Ernst & Young in the mid-1990s, so they're no longer around. But if you wanted to learn real estate, that's where you went. And so we all, my other consultants that were in the consulting department, we all wanted to assist our clients, and we were in Southern California, working with the likes of the Irvine Company, Rancho Mission Viejo. And in 1978, California passed Proposition 13, and literally overnight, the amount of tax revenues that the cities could collect, the counties could collect, was cut to 1%. So the cities were literally overnight out of the infrastructure business, and they turned to the development community and said, hey guys, we don't have the ability to finance infrastructure anymore. If you want it, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. And the development community said, fine, but at least allow us to finance it as if we were a jurisdiction. So in 1982, California passed the Community Facilities District of 1982. The acronym is Mello-Roos Act for the two legislators that passed it, Mello and Roos. And it was at this time that we became consultants, and we read the Community Facilities District Act. And we just kind of sat back and said, let's see if we've got this right. Under one scenario, we can go to a third-party bank. I always use B of A for some reason. And we can borrow $200 million from B of A and pay that back with points and interest as we sell parcels to builders. Or alternatively, we can set up one of these districts and over time issue $200 million of bonds and pass that on to the homeowners. We said, hell, we don't even need a calculator. Let's start doing it. So we approached Irvine Rancho Mission Viejo and started doing the first districts in the state for them, and then soon everybody was using the community facilities districts. Now we were not underwriters. We were just trying to understand the business plans of our company or of our clients, and then within the CFD Act, craft a structure that would get them as close to their business plan goals as we possibly could. So that's how we got started. And because nobody had ever done one of these things before, we knew we couldn't break it. And if we did break it, nobody would know it. and that was the start. And then since then, we've worked all over the country. I left Kenneth Leventhal. We set up another company, and I recently sold out of that one after 27 years. And we set up Launch, and then merged with Land Advisors. So that's kind of how we got here today. Well, that takes care of part one of our interview. And for all of those of you out there, if you enjoyed this episode, please share this with your colleagues and make sure you subscribe to the Land to Lots podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. And as a reminder, really encourage you to go to Amazon and get your copy of Land to Lots. You can drill down on some of the comments and strategies and concepts that we discussed here today. Thanks much.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.